I've just spent nearly 2 hours reviewing the case, Agency for International Development um, versus Society for an Open Foundation. I understand that the Open Society Foundation is a big supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement, and that the Agency for International Development is primarily responsible for State Department related efforts and State Department backed efforts in other countries. And that in the late summer of last year, there was a significant change to the manners in which State Department affiliates were going to be working in other countries. Among the changes that had been established and set up to be put into effect for this fiscal year was a program around alleged entrepreneurship that was going to match the program funding provided through the Agency for International Development with private funding from other partners that were connected to or through the Agency for International Development. It has a different name, this specific program, but the point of the matter is the implications about what was discussed in that case today are very far reaching in terms of the precedents they anticipate moving forward. Just because they got away with it for 10 years or even 20 years doesn't mean they should be able to get away with it with rebranding. I just want to say that. With that in consideration, I'd like to also say that as far as I know and understand, prostitution and sex trafficking are illegal in the United States. They have been determined to be against the law and to be crimes. We are not talking about civil matters that have a civil penalty. These are criminal activities. There is no reason any policy body or any organization working with an international or foreign affiliate should not be able to take a stance on crime in the United States and its impact on potential crime in other countries. Prostitution and acts of sex trafficking are one of the main means by which acts of money laundering occur, including acts of money laundering that are used to finance acts of terrorism. It's not a First Amendment speech issue. And if we're talking about efforts to identify within the cryptocurrency economy a manner in which to quantify the sex trade, as they call it in some places, or sex workers, as they call it in some places, or prostitution in some places, or rape, or sexual exploitation, or child sex predation, or sexual harassment, and what those kinds of terms and what those kinds of verbal cues mean in the crypto commerce economy, then that should be addressed directly and not via a derivative or via some symbolic or metaphorical reference in connection with allegations of addressing free speech. It's also important to know that, especially in the state of Texas, so far as I know specifically, but I understand in other municipalities and states around the United States, members of law enforcement and the legal community are required to be trained in identifying sex trafficking and other acts of trafficking and know how to address it from a perspective of understanding it is a crime. In the state of Texas, they are required under the Occupations Code to have a certificate describing their training and acknowledging they've received a certain amount of training. It is a occupational requirement to have that certificate. If they are in abrogation of the law because they refuse to take a stand condemning crimes, while they are supposed to maintain certification for their professional employment, which also includes meeting performance standards that would be used to create financial portfolios to assess financing for their pay and their benefits, then that is itself a crime. It is not a matter of free speech. Would we expect our foreign affiliates to have any less standards? Or would we allow them to say that they had performed their training in counter sex trafficking or counter trafficking so they could get a certificate that they could use in some sort of financial arrangement, including potentially qualifying for a grant or some other financial instrument? See, that would be called securities fraud by the law. And if that securities fraud finances smuggling of weapons or chemical weapons or biological weapons or leads to an act of terrorism, then it's financing terrorism. It's not about free speech.